After my husband's funeral. A story of truth, betrayal, and redemption. Chapter 1. The Road to Nowhere. The September rain hammered against the windshield as Daniel drove in silence. Margaret sat in the passenger seat, her black dress still damp from standing at the cemetery, her hands clutching a crumpled tissue. The funeral had been beautiful. Robert would have appreciated the turnout. The flowers, the kind words. But now, as they left the suburbs of Chicago behind, heading west on a road she didn't recognize, Margaret felt a creeping unease replace her grief. "Daniel, where are we going?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "We should be heading back to the house. People will be waiting." Her son's jaw tightened. At 32, Daniel had his father's strong features but none of his warmth. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "We need to talk, Mom, away from everyone." The highway gave way to country roads, then to gravel. The landscape became increasingly desolate, abandoned farmhouses, overgrown fields, the kind of forgotten America that existed between cities. Margaret's heart began to race. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that subscribe button. We post emotional, real-life stories every week, and I'd love to have you as part of our community. "Daniel, you're scaring me. What's going on?" He pulled off onto a dirt road that led nowhere, stopping the car in the middle of emptiness. The rain had softened to a drizzle. He turned off the engine, and the silence was deafening. "I found something," Daniel said, staring straight ahead. "In Dad's office, 2 weeks before he died." Margaret's breath caught. "What are you talking about?" Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. His hands were shaking. "I went to the office to get his insurance papers. I found this hidden in a locked drawer." He threw the envelope onto her lap. "Open it." With trembling fingers, Margaret opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, old ones from 20 years ago. Pictures of her with a man she hadn't seen in decades, Thomas Brennan. Her chest tightened. "Who is he?" Daniel's voice was cold, controlled. "And don't lie to me. Not today." Margaret felt the world tilting. The photographs showed her and Thomas at a cafe laughing, walking through Millennium Park, standing too close. They were innocent images, but the context made them damning. "Daniel, this isn't what it looks like." "Then what is it?" He turned to face her, and she saw tears in his eyes. "Because Dad circled dates on the back. Dates that match exactly when you told him you were visiting your sister in Milwaukee. I called Aunt Patricia last week. You weren't there, not once during those weekends." The rain picked up again, creating a cocoon of sound around them. Margaret closed her eyes. After 23 years, the past had caught up with her. Please leave a like if this story is resonating with you. It really helps us reach more people who love emotional, real storytelling. "His name was Thomas Brennan," Margaret began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I met him at a hospital fundraiser. Your father was working 70-hour weeks at the firm, and I was lonely. Thomas was a widower, kind, attentive. We started meeting for coffee." "Coffee," Daniel repeated bitterly. "It never went further than that," Margaret said firmly, meeting her son's eyes. "I swear to you, we talked, that's all. But I was emotionally unfaithful, Daniel. I was falling for someone else, and your father was too busy to notice." "Until he did notice." Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her face. "One day he confronted me. He'd hired someone to follow me. He showed me photographs just like these. I ended it immediately with Thomas. Your father and I went to counseling. We rebuilt our marriage. These past 20 years, they were real, Daniel. We were happy." "Were you?" Daniel's voice cracked. "Or were you just pretending? Was our entire family a lie?" "No." Margaret grabbed his arm. "After that crisis, your father and I became closer than ever. We learned to communicate. He cut back his hours. We fell in love again, the right way. What you saw growing up, that was genuine." Daniel pulled away, wiping his eyes angrily. "Then why did Dad keep these? Why did he hide them?" Margaret looked at the photographs scattered on her lap. "I don't know. Maybe." Maybe he kept them as a reminder of how close he came to losing everything. Or maybe he never fully forgave me. Did he ever mention them after you reconciled? Never. Not once in 20 years. They sat in the car as the rain hammered down, each lost in their own thoughts. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, gray and bleak under the September sky. Don't forget to comment below and let us know what city or country you're watching from. We love hearing from our global audience. There's more, Daniel said finally. In the envelope. Look. Margaret dug deeper and found a letter in Robert's handwriting, dated just 3 months before his heart attack. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. My dearest Margaret. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, not even in our darkest moment. What happened with Thomas taught us both what we had to lose. These photographs, I kept them not out of resentment, but as a reminder of our resilience. But there's something I need to confess, and I was too much of a coward to say it while I was alive. The letter continued, and as Margaret read, her face went pale. Daniel watched his mother's expression transform from confusion to shock, to something he couldn't identify. Mom? What does it say? Margaret lowered the letter, her entire body trembling. Your father. He had an affair too, years before mine, with a paralegal at his firm. It lasted 2 years. The revelation hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Daniel sat back, stunned. He wrote that he never told me because he thought it would destroy me, Margaret continued, her voice hollow. He said watching me with Thomas made him realize how much pain he'd caused, even if I didn't know about it. He said we were even, and he'd forgiven me because he'd needed forgiveness too. Jesus, Daniel breathed. Margaret clutched the letter to her chest, fresh tears falling. All these years, I carried the guilt. I thought I was the one who'd betrayed our vows, who'd almost destroyed our family, and he was carrying his own secret. If you're finding this story emotional and thought-provoking, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stories like these need to be shared. The car felt smaller somehow, filled with the weight of 2 decades of secrets. Outside, the prairie wind bent the tall grasses in waves, endless and indifferent to human pain. What do we do now? Daniel asked quietly. With this information? Margaret looked at her son, really looked at him. She saw Robert in his eyes, but also herself. She saw the pain of disillusionment, the confusion of learning that the people you idolize are deeply, irreparably human. We do what your father and I did, she said softly. We forgive. We remember that people are complicated, that marriages are hard work, and that love, real love, means choosing each other every day, even after mistakes. Can you forgive him? Now that you know? Margaret thought about the man she'd buried that morning. Robert, who brought her coffee in bed every Sunday. Robert, who held her through her mother's death. Robert, who danced with her in the kitchen to old Sinatra songs. Robert, who was flawed, secretive, human. Yes, she said. I can. Can you? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He started the car, and they sat listening to the engine idle, watching the rain create rivers in the dirt road ahead. I don't know, he admitted finally. I thought I knew you both. I thought our family was solid, real. Now I feel like I don't know anything. We were real, Margaret insisted. The love was real. The mistakes were real too. Both can be true, Daniel. He put the car in gear, turning them back toward the main road, toward Chicago, toward the house full of mourners waiting for them. I need time, Daniel said, to process all of this. Take all the time you need, Margaret replied, looking out at the passing landscape. I'll be here. As they drove back toward civilization, Margaret felt something shift inside her. The grief was still there. It would be there for a long time. But it was joined now by something else. Understanding, maybe. Or acceptance of complexity. Her marriage hadn't been perfect, but it had been real. Her husband hadn't been a saint, but he'd been hers. Chapter 1 ends with Margaret and Daniel returning to face their family, carrying secrets that will change everything. What will they do with this new knowledge? Comment below with your thoughts. Chapter 2. The House of Memories. The house was full of people when they returned, 3 hours late. Margaret's sister Patricia rushed to the door, her face tight with worry. "Where have you been? Everyone's been asking." She stopped when she saw Margaret's face. "What happened?" "Not now, Pat," Margaret said quietly, moving past her into the living room. The usual post-funeral crowd filled every room: neighbors, colleagues from Robert's law firm, distant relatives who emerged for life's major events. Margaret moved through them mechanically, accepting condolences, nodding at stories about Robert's generosity and wit. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying the letter, reimagining 20 years of marriage through a new lens. Daniel had disappeared immediately upon arrival, heading upstairs to his old bedroom. Margaret caught glimpses of her daughter-in-law, Jennifer, looking concerned, checking her phone repeatedly. The children, 8-year-old Emma and 5-year-old Lucas, played quietly in the den, aware that something was wrong but unable to articulate what. If you're still watching, thank you. Please subscribe to see how this family navigates their grief and secrets. We post twice a week. By evening, the crowd had thinned. Only close family remained: Patricia and her husband Tom, Daniel and Jennifer, and Robert's brother Michael, who'd flown in from Seattle. They gathered in the kitchen, where Margaret's untouched casseroles covered every surface. "Margaret, you should eat something," Patricia urged, but Margaret just shook her head. Michael, always the direct one, cut through the pretense. "What's going on? You and Daniel disappear for hours, you both come back looking like you've seen a ghost, and now this silence. Robert just died. We should be supporting each other." Margaret looked at Daniel, who stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out at the darkening yard. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. "There's something you all need to know," Margaret began, her voice steadier than she felt. "About Robert, about me, about our marriage." Over the next hour, she told them everything. The affair she'd almost had with Thomas. Robert's counter-revelation in the letter. The years of secrets that had bound their marriage together in ways they never understood. The reactions varied. Patricia was shocked but sympathetic. Tom looked uncomfortable, unsure where to stand in this minefield of family revelation. Michael was angry, not at Margaret or Robert, but at being kept in the dark. "All those years," Michael said, pacing the kitchen, "family dinners, holidays, and you two were carrying these secrets? I thought I knew my brother." "You did know him," Margaret insisted. "The Robert you knew was real. This doesn't erase the good man he was." "Doesn't it?" Daniel spoke up from the window, his voice hard. "How do we know what was real? Maybe everything was performance." Drop a like if you're feeling the emotional weight of this family moment. Real stories like this touch all of us. Jennifer crossed to her husband, placing a hand on his arm. "Daniel, you're grieving. You're angry. But your dad loved you. That was never performance." "How do you know?" Daniel turned on her, frustration spilling over. "Were you there for every moment? Can you point to a single memory and say, that was genuine? Because I can't anymore." "That's the grief talking," Patricia said gently. "When someone dies, especially suddenly, we often get angry. We look for flaws, for reasons why they weren't perfect. It's normal." "Don't therapize me, Aunt Pat. This isn't about processing death. This is about lies. About discovering that the foundation I built my life on was cracked the whole time." Margaret stood, moving toward her son. "Daniel, listen to me. Your childhood, your father coaching your little league, teaching you to drive, walking you through your first heartbreak, that was all real. His love for you never wavered. His mistakes with me don't change that." "How can you defend him?" Daniel asked, and now the tears came again. "After what he did to you?" "Because I did the same thing to him," Margaret said simply. "We hurt each other. We forgave each other. We chose to stay and rebuild. That's what marriage is sometimes. Not perfection, but persistence." Michael sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "My brother and I talked every week for 40 years. How did I not know?" "Because he was private," Margaret said. "You know that about him. He kept his pain close, maybe too close." The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the children playing upstairs. Night had fully fallen now, the windows reflecting their tired, sad faces back at them. Comment below. Do you think Margaret is right to defend Robert? Or is Daniel justified in his anger? We want to hear your perspective. Patricia began making coffee, her way of managing crisis. As the pot gurgled, Jennifer spoke up. Can I say something? As someone who married into this family? She looked around the room. Every family has secrets. Every marriage has difficult chapters. What I've seen in the 5 years I've known you all is love. Imperfect, complicated human love. That's still worth something. Jennifer's right, Tom added, speaking for the first time. Pat and I have been married 30 years. If I'm honest, there have been moments for both of us when we've struggled, when we've made mistakes. Not affairs, but other betrayals. Times we chose work over family or pride over partnership. We're still here because we decided we were worth fighting for. Margaret felt gratitude wash over her. Thank you, she whispered. But Daniel wasn't ready to let go of his anger. So what? We just pretend this is all fine? Act like nothing happened? No, Michael said firmly. We acknowledge it. We sit with the discomfort of knowing our loved ones were flawed. And then we decide, do those flaws erase everything else? Or can we hold both truths at once? Daniel slumped against the counter, exhausted. I don't know how to do that. None of us do, Margaret said. Not at first. But your father and I figured it out, eventually. It took years, and therapy, and a lot of hard conversations. But we did it. How? Daniel asked, and now he sounded young, vulnerable. How did you trust him again after he followed you? After you knew he'd been watching you? Margaret considered the question carefully. I had to separate the action from the person. What he did, hiring someone to follow me, that was wrong. It was invasive and hurtful. But why he did it? Because he was terrified of losing me. Because he'd already experienced infidelity and knew how devastating it was. That I could understand. And his affair? The one he never told you about. That hurts, Margaret admitted. Even now, knowing it only because he's dead and can't explain it further, that hurts. But if I'm honest, knowing it also frees me from years of one-sided guilt. We were both human. We both failed each other at different times. And we both chose to stay. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We're building a community of people who appreciate honest, emotional storytelling. Hit that button. Patricia poured coffee for everyone, and they stood around the kitchen island, holding warm mugs like shields against the cold truth of human imperfection. I found something else, Daniel said quietly. In Dad's desk. I wasn't going to mention it, but... He pulled out his phone, scrolled, and held it up to show a photo of a journal entry. Margaret squinted at the screen. It was Robert's handwriting, dated 5 years ago. Watched Margaret sleep this morning, still beautiful after all these years. Sometimes I can't believe she stayed. I know I don't deserve her loyalty after what I did, but I wake up grateful every day that she never learned about Karen. Coward's gratitude, maybe, but real nonetheless. Today marks 18 years since Margaret's thing with that Brennan fellow. 18 years of proving I deserved a second chance. Funny, she thinks she's the one who needed redemption. Truth is, we saved each other. The kitchen was silent as they absorbed Robert's words from beyond the grave. Margaret's hand shook as she set down her coffee. He called his affair with the paralegal Karen, she said softly. He gave her a name in my mind. Somehow that makes it more real. More forgivable, maybe? She wasn't an abstraction. She was Karen. Are you okay, Mom? Daniel asked, his anger finally softening into concern. I'm sad, Margaret said honestly. Sad that he carried that guilt. Sad that we couldn't have one final conversation about all of this. Sad that he's gone. She looked around at her family. But I'm also grateful. For the 18 years after the crisis, for the love we rebuilt, for you, Daniel. You came from that rebuilt love. Daniel's face changed. What do you mean? Margaret smiled through her tears. You were born 2 years after we reconciled, after we'd done the therapy, after we'd learned to be honest with each other. In a way, you're the proof that broken things can be remade into something strong. What do you think Robert meant when he said they saved each other? Comment your interpretation below. We love discussing these deep questions with you. The evening wore on. Eventually, Michael and Tom went to deal with the children, getting them ready for bed in the guest room. Patricia cleaned up the kitchen with Jennifer, giving Margaret and Daniel space to talk alone. They moved to Robert's study, a room Margaret had avoided since the funeral. Daniel's father's presence was strongest here. Law books lining the walls, the leather chair worn to the shape of his body, framed photos of family moments across the decades. Look at these, Daniel said, pointing to the photos. My graduation, your anniversary party, Emma's birth. Were these real, Mom, or were they staged? Margaret studied each photo, seeing them now with new eyes. They were real, she said with certainty. Look at your father's eyes in this one, your graduation. That's pure pride. And here at our anniversary, that's joy. Genuine, unfiltered joy. How can you be sure? Because I lived those moments, Daniel. I felt his emotions. Whatever happened before, whatever mistakes we both made, they didn't poison everything that came after. If anything, they taught us to appreciate what we had. Daniel sank into his father's chair, looking small and lost. I keep thinking about all the times I came to Dad for advice, about college, about Jennifer, about becoming a father myself. Was he qualified to give advice when his own life was built on secrets? Yes, Margaret said firmly, because his advice came from experience, including his mistakes. That's what made it valuable. He knew what it meant to fail, to hurt someone you love, and to fight your way back. That wisdom didn't come from perfection. It came from imperfection and redemption. Don't forget to subscribe if you're appreciating this honest portrayal of family complexity. Your support means everything. Daniel picked up a small photo from the desk, Robert holding newborn Daniel in the hospital, looking exhausted and happy. I want to forgive him, Daniel said quietly. And you. I want to get past this anger, but I don't know how. Start by remembering that forgiveness isn't a single moment, Margaret said. It's a process. Some days you'll wake up at peace with it. Other days you'll be angry all over again. That's normal. That's human. Did you have days when you were angry at Dad? Even years later? Yes, Margaret admitted. Sometimes something would trigger the memory, seeing a movie about infidelity, or driving past the cafe where Thomas and I used to meet. I'd feel the betrayal all over again, and I'd be angry that Robert had put me in that position by working so much, by being emotionally absent. But then I'd remember my own failures, and the anger would soften into understanding. What about Dad? Did he have angry days about your thing with Thomas? Margaret nodded. Early on, yes. He'd get quiet, withdrawn. I learned to recognize the signs. We developed a code. If he was struggling, he'd make a point of holding my hand at dinner. That was his way of saying, I'm hurting, but I'm choosing us. And I'd squeeze back, which meant, I'm here, I'm staying, we're going to be okay. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. That's what he did. The hand-holding at dinner. I always thought it was just affection. It was, Margaret said. But it was also a promise. A daily recommitment to our marriage. They sat together in Robert's study as the house quieted around them. Outside, an October wind rattled the windows, carrying the first chill of approaching winter. Tell me something good, Daniel said. About you and Dad. Something from after the trouble. Something that proves it was worth it. Margaret smiled. A real smile for the first time in days. About 10 years ago, we took a trip to Maine. Just the two of us. We rented a cabin on the coast. One morning, I woke up before dawn and found your father sitting on the porch, watching the sunrise. I joined him, and we sat there in silence for an hour, just being together. Finally, he said, I've never been happier than I am right now. And I knew exactly what he meant, not because our life was perfect, but because we'd fought for it, and won. Daniel wiped his eyes. I wish he'd told me all this before he died. Maybe he wanted to protect you, Margaret said. Or maybe he thought there'd be more time. We always think there'll be more time. And if this story is touching your heart, please leave a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Real stories heal real wounds. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight. A new day, technically, though it felt like the longest day of Margaret's life. Daniel stood moving toward the door. I should get Jennifer and the kids home, he said. They've had a long day too. Margaret stood as well, embracing her son. Thank you, she whispered, for loving your father enough to be angry, for caring enough to demand truth. That's what makes you a good man. I learned it from him, Daniel said. Even with all this, I learned it from him. After Daniel's family left, after Patricia and Tom retreated to the guest room, Margaret found herself alone in the house she'd shared with Robert for 32 years. She climbed the stairs to their bedroom, though now it was just hers. Robert's clothes still hung in the closet. His reading glasses sat on the nightstand. The indent of his body remained in his side of the mattress. Margaret lay down on his side of the bed, breathing in the faint scent of his cologne, and finally let herself fully grieve. Not just for the man she'd lost, but for the imperfect, beautiful, complicated marriage they'd built together. For the secrets they'd kept, and the forgiveness they'd granted. For all the ordinary moments that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now glowed with irreplaceable value. I forgive you, she whispered into the darkness. For Karen, for the surveillance, for all of it. And thank you for forgiving me. We did good, didn't we? In the end, we did good. The house settled around her, creaking and sighing, full of ghosts that were only memories. Chapter 2 ends with Margaret beginning to make peace with the complex truth of her marriage. But there's one more revelation waiting, one that will change everything she thought she knew. Stay subscribed to read Chapter 3. Chapter 3. The Real Inheritance. 3 weeks after Robert's funeral, Margaret received a call from Howard Breslin, Robert's law partner for 20 years. Margaret, I apologize for the timing, but there's something you need to see. Can you come to the office this afternoon? The law firm occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Chicago tower, all glass and steel and impressive views of Lake Michigan. Margaret hadn't been here since Robert's retirement party 5 years ago. Walking through the lobby felt like visiting a museum of someone else's life. Howard met her personally, looking uncomfortable. Thank you for coming. I know this is difficult timing, but, well, you'll understand when you see. He led her to Robert's old office, which had been converted into a conference room. On the table sat 3 cardboard boxes and a laptop. When we were clearing out Robert's storage unit, he'd kept one for personal files, we found these, Howard explained. They're journals, 30 years worth, and video diaries. He started recording them about 10 years ago. Margaret's hand went to her throat. Video diaries? He left instructions that they should be given to you after his death, but only if you wanted them. You're under no obligation to watch or read. But I thought you should know they exist. Hit subscribe right now. You won't want to miss how this story concludes. The truth is about to come out. Margaret stared at the boxes. 30 years of Robert's private thoughts. The complete truth of his interior life. Did she want to know? Would it heal or hurt? I'll take them, she heard herself say. She loaded the boxes into her car, along with the laptop, and drove home in a daze. For 2 days, they sat in her living room, unopened. She walked around them, served them tea, treated them like unwelcome house guests she didn't know how to evict. Finally, on a gray Saturday morning, she opened the first journal. January 3rd, 1995. Margaret doesn't know I'm writing this. Hell, I barely know why I'm writing this. Breslin suggested it. Says putting things on paper helps process them. Process what? The fact that I nearly destroyed my marriage. The fact that I fell for someone at work and let it go too far? Karen is a good person. That's what makes it worse. This wasn't a meaningless fling. For 2 years, I had feelings for someone who wasn't my wife. I ended it last month. Karen transferred to the New York office. Margaret never knew, but I know, and the guilt is eating me alive. Maybe that's appropriate. Maybe I should suffer. Margaret read through months of entries detailing Robert's guilt, his attempts to be a better husband, his fear that Margaret would somehow sense his betrayal. Then she reached the entry from September 1996, when he'd discovered her meetings with Thomas. September 14th, 1996. I hired a detective, like something out of a bad movie. But I knew something was wrong. The distance in Margaret's eyes, the vague answers about her weekends. The photos confirmed it. She's having coffee with some man, Thomas Brennan. They look happy, the way she looks at him. I haven't seen her look at me that way in years. The irony isn't lost on me. I betrayed her first and she doesn't even know. Now she's on the verge of betraying me. Is this karma? Punishment? Or just what happens when two people stop paying attention to each other? I should confront her, but I'm terrified. If I tell her about the photos, she might confess everything. And then what? Do I confess my affair? Do we tear everything apart? Or do I keep my secret and demand she end hers? What kind of hypocrite does that make me? Comment below. What would you do in Robert's position? We want to hear your thoughts. Margaret read on, tears streaming down her face. The entries documented Robert's decision to confront her, their painful counseling sessions, his relief when she ended things with Thomas. But through it all, his own secret remained buried. April 2nd, 1997. Therapy again today. Dr. Morrison asked if there was anything else we needed to address. I almost told them, almost confessed about Karen. But Margaret was crying, apologizing for the 100th time, and I couldn't do it. Couldn't add my betrayal to her guilt. She thinks she's the broken one. How do I tell her we're both broken? Maybe I won't. Maybe my punishment is carrying this alone. Let her heal. Let her think she's the only one who needed forgiveness. I can live with that. Margaret set down the journal, her heart aching. Robert had sacrificed his own absolution to protect her. He'd carried his guilt in silence so she could find peace. She moved to the laptop, opening the first video diary. Robert's face filled the screen, gray-haired and tired, sitting in what looked like his office after hours. September 2019. Margaret, if you're watching this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry for so many things. But I'm making these videos because there are things I need you to know. Things I couldn't say while I was alive. Over the next week, Margaret watched hours of footage. Robert talking about his affair with Karen, explaining that he'd kept it secret not to deceive her, but because he couldn't bear to burden her with more pain after the Thomas situation. I know how that sounds, video Robert said. Like I was making decisions for you. Like I was being paternalistic. Maybe I was. But Margaret, you were so fragile after we nearly lost each other. Building you back up, rebuilding us. That became my life's purpose. I couldn't knock you down again just to ease my conscience. Don't forget to like this video if you're feeling the emotional weight of Robert's decision. Every like helps us share these important stories. Another video showed Robert reflecting on their marriage. People think good marriages are about never failing each other, but the truth is, good marriages are about failing each other and choosing to stay anyway. Margaret and I, we failed spectacularly, but then we succeeded even more spectacularly. Every happy year after 1997 was a choice we made, a victory we won together. Margaret found herself talking back to the screen. I wish you'd told me. I wish we could have been honest with each other about everything. As if anticipating this, video Robert smiled sadly. I know you're probably angry that I kept this from you. You have every right to be. But Margaret, I need you to understand, telling you would have been selfish. It would have made me feel better and made you feel worse, so I chose to carry it, and I'd make the same choice again. The final video was dated just a month before Robert's heart attack. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and I want to tell you what my life meant. Margaret, you were my life. Our marriage, imperfect, complicated, human, was the greatest achievement of my existence. Greater than any case I won, any partnership I made. You stayed when you could have left. You forgave when you could have held a grudge. You chose me, every day, for 40 years. Robert's voice broke. I hope I made you happy. I hope the good years outweighed the hard ones. And I hope you'll forgive me one last time for keeping secrets, for trying to protect you in ways you might not have wanted. I loved you, Margaret. Imperfectly, but completely. Always. The screen went dark. Margaret sat in the silence of her living room, tears streaming down her face, but also smiling. Because despite everything, the affairs, the secrets, the complications, what she felt most strongly was love. Deep, abiding, complicated love for a man who'd been beautifully, frustratingly human. Subscribe to our channel to see how this family processes this final revelation. We're building a community of people who appreciate real, emotional storytelling. She called Daniel that evening. Can you come over tomorrow? I need to show you something. The next day, Daniel arrived with Jennifer and the kids. While Emma and Lucas played in the backyard, Margaret showed Daniel and Jennifer the journals and played excerpts from the videos. Daniel watched his father's confession with tears running down his face. When the final video ended, he was quiet for a long time. He really loved you, Daniel finally said. I mean, I knew that. But this, he really, really loved you. He did, Margaret agreed, and I loved him, despite everything, because of everything. Jennifer spoke up, her voice thoughtful. Can I say something? My parents divorced when I was young. Really bitter divorce. Lots of blame and resentment. Watching them hate each other taught me that love isn't simple. But this, she gestured at the laptop, this is teaching me that love can survive complexity, that maybe the goal isn't perfection, it's honesty and effort. That's exactly right, Margaret said. Your father-in-law and I, we weren't perfect, but we were honest, eventually, and we put in the effort, every day. Daniel picked up one of the journals, running his hand over his father's handwriting. I was so angry when we drove out to that field. I felt betrayed, like everything I believed was a lie. And now? Margaret asked gently. Now I think I'm grateful. That Dad and you showed me that real love is messy, that it requires forgiveness and work. That's a more valuable lesson than if you'd been perfect. What's your take on this story? Comment below with your thoughts. We love engaging with our community and hearing different perspectives. Over the following months, Margaret shared different pieces of Robert's journals and videos with various family members. Patricia read entries about Robert's